Thanksgiving Orphans is so special. This is the ninth episode of the fifth season of Cheers, directed, of course, by the wonderful James Burrows, and this is the third top-rated episode on IMDb. And the only two that come before it, number one is the final episode, and number two is actually episode 20 of the fifth season. So season 5 seems to be doing quite well. In fact, most of the top-rated are from season 5, but without a doubt, in my opinion, Thanksgiving Orphans is one of the most beautiful, perfect, emotional, hilarious episodes with some pretty iconic moments. So as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and talk about what happens and share some thoughts along the way. It starts off with Woody coming into Cheers, asking Sam if he can put up some Christmas decorations. There we are establishing roughly what time of year it is. And then Diane puts on a pilgrim bonnet and we realise that it's set around Thanksgiving. Now, there is one frustrating thing about this episode, but it's not so much the episode, but rather the situation between Sam and Diane, because Diane tells Sam that since he didn't ask her to spend Thanksgiving with him, she's decided to make other plans, and this is why she's wearing a bonnet. She's dressing up, going to one of the professor's houses, and this is really frustrating because Sam has made a date, but in the previous episode, we came so close to Sam and Diane realising they're meant to be together. And every time they take a step forward, it's like we're taking 2 steps back. And it's so incredibly irritating to see. So that really irked me, but the rest of the episode is really beautiful. Carla and Woody both reveal that they're actually alone for Thanksgiving, so Diane suggests that they all gather at Carla's house. Not Diane, she has plans, but she suggests that it might be a nice idea if everybody who's going to be alone goes to Carla's house, and we spend a couple of minutes going around pretty much all of the main characters, establishing what their Thanksgiving plans are, learning that actually none of them have any plans, apart from Norm, who's meant to be spending time with Vera and Vera's sister, but he doesn't want to do that, so he decides that this year he's going to put his foot down and say that they're going to Carla's house. Cut to the next scene, we're actually at Carla's house, and the rest of the episode is at Carla's, and I don't know this for a fact, but I feel like this is probably the least amount of time we spend at Cheers in any episode. I could be wrong about that. I could be misremembering another episode. But the point there is that for the first time in the show, we spend a tiny, tiny amount of time at Cheers and the rest of the time away from the bar. And it's not a problem, and it works really well. And I guess the main reason it works, well, there are a few reasons. The first is that it's just funny and emotional. And it's just absolutely beautiful. But the second reason is that we have all of the main characters right throughout the episode, which is just so wonderful to see. Initially, it's Frasier, Cliff, and Woody. They're dressed casually. They're watching sports in Carla's front room. Norm comes in. He even gets a Norm, even though we're away from the bar, which I loved. And Vera's not with him just now because actually they had a fight about where they're spending Thanksgiving. And this is actually really sweet because a few minutes later, Norm has gone through to the kitchen, the doorbell rings, and Norm actually rushes to get to the door because he thinks it's Vera. And that is so sweet because we're so used to Norm. I don't want to say bad-mouthing Vera because it's not quite like that, but certainly maybe not talking about her as positively as he could do, but whenever it matters, we actually see that Norm does have this great love for Vera, and this is what we see with Norm rushing to the door. It wasn't Vera, it was Sam. Unfortunately, his date's sister came into town, so he's now spending time with Carla and the others. We have some really fun comedy in the front room as they keep shifting the television, and those on the sofa, Cliff and Woody and occasionally Frasier, just keep moving with the television, which I thought was an absolute delight. And then Sam says at one point they're talking about how it's great to be all spending time together with your friends rather than being forced to spend time with family, and Sam says when you're with family, you're just, and I quote, waiting for some nutty old aunt to show up and spoil your fun. There's a knock at the door. Carla opens the door. It's Diane, dressed in her pilgrim costume, and she says, gobble, gobble, and Carla slams the door, and it's fantastic. And obviously, it was essential that Diane was at Carla's, because we needed everybody together for this episode to be as beautiful as it ultimately ended up being. And it turns out that actually the students were invited to serve the drinks. And that's going to hurt. If you feel like you've been invited to this exclusive event and it turns out you're just there to serve the drinks, that's really going to hurt. And Diane ended up crying and fleeing and then going to Carla's, and she ends up phoning her professor to give him what for, and he actually apologises and invites her back, and Diane decides that actually she's going to stay here with her friends, which I found to be so moving and so lovely, particularly as Diane is often not invited to things that mostly the whole gang partake in. So the fact that Diane has this opportunity to spend time with them and she chooses that over this exclusive event, I think is really beautiful. And it made me a little bit emotional. Diane then spends a lot of time whinging about how they're all watching sports, which I completely agree with. I am with Diane on that one. I'm not a sports person. And then they're all gathering around the table. The turkey's not ready. Diane suggests they all go around saying what they're thankful for. Sam starts at Diane's insistence. And then Woody volunteers to go next. And Woody very much is a source of positivity here. Whenever things seem to be getting a little bit down or a little bit heavy, Woody brings in some positivity, and I think he's just such a great presence. And yes, it was difficult to lose Coach, but bringing in Woody is a beautiful silver lining to that heartache. But Woody brings in so much positivity and he has such a great outlook, and we really see this in this episode. And he gives this really sweet speech that ends in him showing his party trick. And there's this fabulous moment. This is one of the moments. There were two occasions where I actually rewound it a little bit and watched it a few times. And Woody does his party trick and then Carla does hers. And then the next thing we know, they're all just doing their party tricks. And I don't know what Sam is doing. He just looks like he's licking the plate. I genuinely don't know, but I did. I rewound it and watched it a few times, and it's just an absolute joy. And I did this again a little later on, but I'll talk about that in a moment. They're all getting really... I'm just picturing Sam doing whatever he's doing to that plate. They're all getting really frustrated because the bird isn't cooking. They're getting really hungry, and somebody throws food. It's actually Norm. He flicks a pea at Carla because he dropped her perfect peas, and then she ends up throwing carrot back, and it escalates a little slowly to begin with. It's not an instant food fight. And then the next thing we know, they're just throwing food, and Diane loses her mind for about 5 seconds. Shelley Long's performance in those 5 seconds, amazing. I mean, it's amazing throughout, but absolutely incredible. And she's about to scold them, and Sam throws something at her. I think it was cranberry sauce. It's bright red. It lands on the white of her pilgrim outfit, and she throws something back, and they have this incredible food fight. And this is the other bit that I rewound. I actually rewound it 7 times. I've seen this episode before. I knew it was coming, and I was so excited for this. But the reason I decided to watch it 7 times, it only lasts about 15 seconds or something. It's not incredibly long. Okay, I just went back and watched it again. It lasts 20 seconds from when Diane retaliates and throws something at Sam until we cut to the next scene. And they are 20 of the most beautiful seconds, not just in Cheers, but of any TV show ever. And as I was saying, I did rewind it and watch it 7 times because I wanted to watch each of the characters in turn. And each of them just gave this incredible performance that clearly had all of their energy and all of their talents. And it was just so beautiful to watch. And I thoroughly recommend you do the same. It is so beautiful and so funny, and I loved every second of it. The next scene makes me feel a little bit sick because we cut to the aftermath where they're all sitting around the table. We can see the turkey's carcass. Clearly the turkey finally cooked itself, and they are just covered in food. Norm in particular, basically not an inch of his shirt is not covered, and Shelley Long's hair is dripping with goodness knows what. And it's the fact that they just ate the food and had the turkey while covered in this food. And it's disgusting, but it's absolutely amazing. And I imagine they would have had to have been hosed down after that. I'd love to see some behind the scenes footage for that scene. I don't know if it exists, but I would absolutely love to see that. And then Woody proposes a toast and they go around saying the names of people who are not currently with them. Woody mentions his parents, Carla mentions her children who are spending Thanksgiving with Nick, and Sam mentions Coach. And I lost it at that point because I was on such an incredible high from this amazing scene, this beautiful 20-second chaos. And then we mention Coach, and that sudden drop to sorrow is so significant that I think it's very difficult to keep it together. It's wonderful, it's beautiful. I think it was absolutely the way to take this episode as we come down from this incredible high and think of those who are no longer around. And I think it was so important to mention Coach in that moment, and it's really, really beautiful. Then there's a knock at the door. Norm goes to answer, and we hear him say, "Vera, you came." And I don't remember exactly how I feel with every Cheers episode, but I significantly remember my response to this episode and that moment in particular where I thought, we're about to meet Vera. That's incredible. And Vera is about to come into the room. At the same time, Diane is about to get her revenge on Sam for throwing the cranberry sauce on her. She's got a dessert in her hand. She launches it. And the next thing we know, Vera walks into the room with dessert on her face. So we don't actually get to see Vera at all. We see her body. We see her standing next to Norm, which is beautiful, but she has dessert on her face. And she's actually played by Bernadette Birkett. So if anybody does want to Google what Vera would look like, in theory, that is the casting there. And she's definitely not what I expected Vera to look like in my mind. But at the same time, I don't think that matters very much at all. It was such a brilliant moment and absolutely the perfect way to conclude this episode. It is an incredible episode that is so beautiful from start to finish, and the range of emotions I feel when watching it is so incredible, and it definitely makes me very emotional. I am so thankful for Cheers. I cannot explain what Cheers has done for me since I started watching the show about 4 years ago. That's not an incredibly long amount of time, but long enough for me to decide to drop a significant amount of money to fly to the States to visit Cheers in Boston. Incredible experience, thoroughly recommended. They actually play the theme tune to Cheers in the entrance, which just made me struggle to hold back the tears as I was going into the bar, and it's an incredible, incredible experience. But the point there is that Cheers is so special to me, and it became special pretty much from day one. And this episode is a great example of why that's the case. We have a beautiful cast, wonderful characters, a fantastic story with so many emotions, it doesn't seem real. And not for 1 second am I surprised that Thanksgiving Orphans is the third highest rated episode of all time. In my opinion, it should be number 1, but number 3 is not a bad place to be. I absolutely love it, and I am so incredibly thankful for Cheers, for this episode, for the cast. Honestly, don't know where I'd be just now without it. The show means the world to me, and Thanksgiving Orphans is absolutely perfect.